What's up guys, Super Macho Gamer here, and the title is not clickbait. Not this time. So, if you still have your original Switch and you are thinking about trading it in or selling it for a Switch 2, don't. Especially if you still have a collection of physical Switch games or even digital games that you still want to play. So what do I mean? And why am I saying this? Well, it turns out the Switch 2, it's not really the end-all be-all continuation of being able to play your Switch 1 games as we thought. So, as Nintendo announced when they first revealed the console, certain Switch 1 games will be playable and others will not. When they first announced it, most of us just thought, well, yeah, Labo, maybe Ring Fit Adventure, games that require the Joy-Cons would not be playable. Turns out it's kind of more than that. So what do I mean? Well, here is the official Nintendo website. You can come look this up. It tells you the compatibility of Nintendo Switch games with Nintendo Switch 2. And it says right here, in addition to Nintendo Switch 2 games, Nintendo Switch 2 can play compatible physical and digital released on the Nintendo Switch system. And then they actually have a graph, which is a little odd, especially how it's broken down. And this is their status of compatibility test for Nintendo Switch games and Nintendo Switch 2. Now, if you look, they broke it down by colors. Dark blue, they found no issues in the games playing on the Switch 2. And more than, I would say, 90% of the Nintendo first-party games play perfectly fine. And on a side note, I thought Nintendo released way more than only 122 games. But then if you look on the partner games, about 22% show that they work perfectly fine. But a bulk majority of the third-party games or partner games that they show on the website, the games will start, but will require further testing for them to work. And then about maybe 2% show that the games are playable, but there's kind of some problems. And then you have issues were found during startup, which mean the game might not work properly, and then some games straight up are not compatible, which, as we scroll down the website here, are the ones that require the Joy-Con. So Ring Fit Adventure, 1-2 Switch, Everybody 1-2 Switch, apparently Wii Sports, WarioWare, Labo, none of these will work, period. So if you have any of these and you like playing them, they will not work on the Switch 2. So you need your original Switch console if you want to play them. But why? Why are they limited on certain games that do not have the function? Well, when they first announced this, I, like everyone else, just thought Joy-Con games make sense, perfectly fine. It wasn't until they started showing and talking about upgrades of the games, especially for Breath of the Wild, the Zelda games. Now, as you can see, visually, more details and everything, which is what you expect from an improved version. I believe this footage is showing the gameplay at 4K 60 FPS. And let me skip ahead a little bit. During this part of Link running through where you get the Master Sword, where the laggiest part of the game is when I kind of noticed something that shouldn't be happening. The pop-ins, especially right here with the flowers, are the same. Link gets to a certain point before everything loads in. There's visible pop-it. If this was truly an improved version of the game, like a PS5 Pro version or improved play for a Series X game, it should be optimized. And then it kind of made sense. The reason why Switch games have issues playing on it and why the optimizations aren't fully there and why some games cannot work, these aren't running natively on the Switch 2. Switch 1 games are being emulated to play on the Switch 2. I guess to put it a better way, the Switch 2 lacks the ability to properly play these games. The ones who worked on the Switch 2 actually kind of confirmed it. So this is one of their Q&As, the Ask the Developers they did. And on part 4, where it says a new standard, you see is like, I'm sure that those who already own Nintendo Switch games will be delighted that they can play them on Nintendo Switch 2. Did you already decide on this function when you were first planning the development of a new dedicated game system? And the answer, right from the beginning, we wanted the new system to be able to play Switch games, but back then, we were told there'd be technical challenges. When we first started Switch 2 development, the focus was on enhancing its performance as hardware, namely expanding its capacity. So compatibility was a lower priority. For example, Nintendo DS games were playable on Nintendo 3DS and Wii games were playable on Wii U, but it was difficult to achieve the same level of compatibility with Switch 2 because the hardware design approach was different from those systems. Now, for the 3DS and the DS and the Wii and the Wii U, the new systems, the 3DS and the Wii U, had the hardware to be able to play the previous gen games. When you put in a Wii disc into the Wii U, you had to boot up the Wii operating system and then you played on a Wii, which was technically just a fancy GameCube. And that's why the Wii could play GameCube games, because it was just a fancy GameCube. But let's continue for the Switch 2. Does that mean the Switch and Switch 2 aren't compatible at the hardware level? Exactly. This time, we decided to take on the challenge of using new technology to run Switch games. If we tried to use technology like software emulators, we'd have to run Switch 2 at full capacity, but that would mean the battery wouldn't last so long. So we did something that's somewhere in between, a software emulator and hardware compatibility. A software program that imitates certain hardware commonly used to run old software on a new device. It requires higher processing power than the original device. This is getting a bit technical, but the process of converting game data for Switch to run on Switch 2 is performed on a real-time basis as the data is read in. Is it like having Switch games simultaneously translated for Switch 2? That's right. Although we'd made the technological preparations at first, we weren't quite sure whether it would be able to maintain proper compatibility. So there we have it. Like, Nintendo said it themselves, it's not emulation per se, but it's emulation per se. It's half emulation, half hardware. The Switch 2 is using and playing Switch 1 games. It's not running on the system itself. So what the Switch 2 is doing with Switch 1 games is kind of what the Xbox 360 did with original Xbox games. It can play some of them, but it's not fully doing it on the system. It's not fully compatible like the Wii U and the Wii were. It is emulating the game, and if it's able to use its new power and hardware to improve the game, then it does so. And that's where we see Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and other games look so much better than they did on the original Switch, but it's not truly playing them. That's why there can be room for error, and why Nintendo made it clear that there's problems with the list. So at the end of the day, if you have a good Switch collection and you want to make sure you have full access to that collection, keep your original Switch unit. If you only have a couple games and they're mainly Nintendo games and you don't really care about it being emulated or playing natively, then you can do whatever you want. I'm not your dad, but just keep that in mind. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll catch you all next time.